Chances are you're here today to learn something about the world from a stranger in hopes of learning something about yourself. Well then, let us begin. I want us to start by imagining our lives as a prism. We shine a light on this prism, this light representing our efforts, our focuses, what we're working on right now at this moment. And on the other side, a beautiful spectrum of colors appear. This is the palette of your life as you know it, familiar and comforting. And that was me. That was me at 6 years old performing my first ever sonata in a room full of kind, elderly people. By that age, somehow, miraculously, I had debuted at Carnegie Hall. And for the next 9 years of my life, I deepened my studies in the piano. When my family moved to London, I started to study at the Royal Academy of Music. And when I returned back to the States, I found myself in the halls of Juilliard, surrounded by kids that were just like me. The piano was the light source of my life's prism, ever since I first touched its keys at 4 years old. And that moment was more than just a child's curiosity. It marked the beginning of a long, long journey, one that was, of course, brushed by luck. The piano was a steadfast pillar of who I was and who I was meant to be. And then one day, returning home from 8th grade, a little tired and a little sunburnt, my parents told me that we were moving to Japan. I was suddenly thrown into a world that I'd never seen before, and I met new people, I saw new things, I experienced new cultures and practices. I saw a part of the world that I could have never imagined I'd step foot in. And like every other kid out there, I realized just how vast this world was and how little I knew about it. I realized the sheer amount of possibilities this world offered. And even though music was still ever so important to me, I started to question and to think, what if the piano, which had been part of my life and my identity for so long, wasn't all that I was meant for? What if there was more to my life's purpose? You, me, and the greatest thinkers of our time, we all think alike. This question of what was I made for is something I'm sure all of you have once asked yourselves. In fact, according to a survey done by Edward Elmhurst, only 25% of Americans actually have a clear sense of what their purpose is. That means that 75%, a pretty overwhelming majority, have little to no idea what their direction in life is. And this is especially evident among young people today. If you were to ask me, or any of my fellow classmates, what do you want to be when you grow up? Chances are they're not going to answer you with that childhood dream of becoming a princess or a knight. They're going to answer you with a sheepish smile and a quiet, I don't know. However, this is where I encourage you to step out there and change that statement, add a little word to that statement that will change everything. And that is, I don't know yet. How come? Because figuring out who you are, why you stand here on this earth, that's a question that can only be answered through a little something called lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is a concept that was first brought up in 1929 by a man named Basil Yeaksley, who was a pretty prominent figure in education. And since then, lifelong learning has found itself in traces all over the world. In 1960, it was even discussed and adopted in a UNESCO conference. Sigdum Hirsen, who was a director of a lifelong learning center all the way in Turkey, took this UNESCO conference and then summarized lifelong learning into 4 main points. Number 1, education and learning shouldn't only be pursued in school. Number 2, education and learning should be the main component of your life. Number 3, education should be flexible. And most importantly, number 4, education and learning should be designed as a lifelong process. Lifelong learning is the idea that you should and must keep learning for your entire lives for yourselves. It's the idea of pursuing additional education, going beyond what were once boundaries. Now, let's pair this with another theory, the experiential learning theory. Penned by David Kolb, an American psychologist who graduated from Harvard, ELT states that humans learn best through doing and exploring, not just watching and observing from the sidelines. These two concepts put together are telling us that we find our purpose by doing and exploring for not just our adolescence, but for our entire lives. A perfect example of this is Yo-Yo Ma. I'm sure all of you have heard of him. He's a spectacular cellist and an amazing human being. He was pretty well known and very talented ever since he was a kid. But what if I told you that at 18 years old, he changed his entire life's course? Instead of going down that road to become a traditional cellist, he went to Harvard to study anthropology. However, this wasn't a complete diversion from his life as a musician. In fact, it was an expansion of his artistic sensibility. After he graduated, he returned to the cello, and this time his music was infused with insights from his anthropological studies. This time, his music was deeper and more insightful than ever before. And now, I am no Yo-Yo Ma, but I'd like to think that my journey has been a little bit similar. Moving to Japan was a pivot that illuminated my life under a new light. And here, now, I study with a professor from the Tokyo University of Music, and she's introduced me to something completely brand new to me: Japanese music. For the first time in 11 years, I wasn't just studying Mozart or Beethoven or Chopin. I was learning Tokuyama, Takemitsu, and Sakamoto. From this small experience, I learned that exploring things that were once obscured in your life, in music, actually deepened my connection with my instrument. By exploring other things and pursuing other pathways, you learn more about the world and about yourself. Now, remember, your life now feels more fulfilling. I want us to go back to that idea of the prism, that light source that shines down being your efforts, your focuses, and on the other side, colors, your outcomes. Okay, let's say that something happens. You see something, you do something, you learn something. For me, that was moving to a completely different continent, but for you, that can be anything. And suddenly, your light source has changed positions. And from this new angle, it shines down on your prism. And on the other side, new colors appear. By taking on and experiencing changes, you not only learn more about the world, but more about yourself. And for those of you that are worried about losing previous colors, or in real terms, losing previous skills or passions or hobbies, remember that it's never about losing. It's about gaining. By pursuing and exploring other pathways in my life, I'm not losing the piano. It's still right by my side, and it forever will be. The point is that we're going back, and we're adding colors to our palette so that we can lead a more colorful life. You can be as talented and dedicated as Yo-Yo Ma, or you can be just like me, a regular high schooler with a passion for music. In fact, this summer, I'm going back and reuniting with my 6-year-old debut hall. I'm going back to perform at Carnegie. And you can be just like me, or you can be somewhere in between. Either way is fine. The point is, chances are, you don't really know what your purpose is yet. Chances are, you're trying to figure that out. And chances are that with embracing the art of doing and the art of learning, chances are that you can. And with this, I wish you the best of luck in finding yourself on this wide, vast planet. Thank you so much.